many piano students ask me how to learn fugues, and it's really challenging because fugue is an intellectual genre. So they are designed like a labyrinth where all the voices are equally important and equally informative. It's not something you do overnight, even if you are a very experienced pianist. Of course, there are a few people with phenomenal memory who can learn something as complex as a fugue by just sight reading it a couple of times. And if you're one of them, go away, I hate you. But for the rest of us, normal humans, we have to develop a strategy to do it quickly enough and at least with some fun. Because this is a very overwhelming, exhausting intellectual activity, of course. And exactly because of that, fugues are almost compulsory in classical piano education because they're so great for training your brain. That's why I would say that if you're a passionate hobbyist player, you should aim to master at least 3-4 fugues. For example, from a well-tempered clavier by Bach. And it's of course hard to imagine an accomplished concert pianist who hasn't learned at least a dozen of fugues throughout the course of his education.
By following the link in the description, you will find a list of my comprehensive video courses. These courses are designed to help you improve your piano playing technique and offer detailed guidance on piano pieces of all levels. Additionally, you can also schedule an online lesson with me following the link in the description.
So, the first goal is to understand the structure of the fugue. They are always structured in a very specific, very precise way. And luckily, we have an internet because in my time we had to bother music theory professors, music theory teachers for analysis. One student from my music school, where I used to study, asked a theory professor to explain his fugue. And he spent 2 hours there with this professor, and when he came out he said, like, I understand it so well that I just hate it, I'm not going to play it anymore. So I don't know what this professor did to this poor guy during those 2 hours, but usually we remember things when we actually understand them very well. For that, you go to some website that offers a comprehensive analysis of the fugue. For example, the website tonicchord.com is really great in this regard, and on this website you can find a comprehensive analysis of your fugue, and then you take a highlighter and you move through your fugue following this list and making a plan of your fugue similarly to how you would make a plan of a building before actually starting to erect it, hopefully. Yes, so for example, we see that bars 1 and 2 is our subject in tenor, and our subject is our seed of the fugue. Let's take this D major fugue as an example. So this is our subject. This is like the principal element from which the whole fugue grows. And the first 2 bars is featuring the subject in tenor voice. And then we go to a real answer in alto, and real answer means that we take the subject and we transpose it ideally to the next key, namely to A major. If I would modify this answer in any way, like this, for example, in order to end up in A minor, it would be a tonal answer. So tonal answer means we modify the theme a little bit in order to find a new color for it. And a real answer means that we just transpose it as it is perfectly. Then we have a very short codetta, where we basically have an interchange between 2 voices. Your alto says, and the other voice answers with the same motive. And when you have such a situation, what helps tremendously is to use a little bit of fantasy and make it a little bit more entertaining by, for example, imagining a dialogue of different people. So basically, think of these voices of different people and create a story between them. For example, one office worker sings something like, I love my work, and another sings, what's wrong with you? Yeah? So then immediately you have kind of emotion, you understand what kind of relation they have. And this is what I love most about music of Bach, and let me illustrate it on another example from actually Prelude, which precedes this fugue. There is a spot where 2 voices in the right hand have kind of an argument. So one voice says something like, hey you, go make the laundry, hey you, go clean the dishes, hey you. So it's kind of like chain of commands, because we have those leaps of fourth and we have those syncopated notes. And another voice kind of disagrees. Why me? Why me? Why me? No, go to hell. So then we have this kind of very active interchange, and we actually have some kind of a funny story. So then I can actually remember it very quickly if I create this kind of interpersonal relation between these two voices. But then suddenly they forget about their discrepancies and they start to make friends. They start to move in parallel motion, singing together. Now that's a best friends ever. And let's look at the left hand, what happens with the left hand. So while these two were fighting, the left hand was like predictable, diatonic mostly. So nothing particular happens, it's just kind of like having fun. It's kind of content. But as soon as these make friends, the left hand immediately starts to be like, what? So we immediately get those chromatics and we get those alternated pitches, G sharp, A sharp, so the tension rises. Those two voices are friends now, but the left hand is like, what? What's wrong? So it tries to disrupt that friendship. And it actually succeeds, because then things go just south and we have a complete disagreement between everyone. And even here, we end this section not with a 4-5-1 cadenza as we would expect normally, but we have a diminished chord, and then we resolve it. So if I create a story like this, I actually understand the spot, and it's much easier to learn it now because I have a very clear idea what kind of characters I want to convey. So that's an example how your fantasy can actually help you to learn. And whenever you react emotionally, whenever you find some extra musical association or a story, whenever you make up something interesting, you will trigger your emotions. And whenever we experience some emotion, when we made up a story and get excited about this, because it's kind of funny in the moment, we learn better. So emotions help memorization. So you go through the score with this plan and you mark with brackets different sections of this piece, so you would clearly see what's where is the beginning of my section and where's the end of it. And then I would suggest you to take a highlighter and highlight each subject in each voice throughout the whole piece, because one of your tasks and goals is to be able to, first of all, to know where you have a subject, because this is the most essential seed of your fugue, but also you should be able to play them louder than the rest. It's not that you want to always do this when you perform the fugue, but you must be able to mark them at any time. So it's very useful to practice by playing your subject mezzo forte each time, but all the rest of the voices are played piano. So that's a very good exercise. The next tip is I really suggest you to sing everything. So whenever you learn a voice, just sing it and try to feel with your voice the distances, the intervals between the voices, between the notes. F sharp, B, that's a fourth. G sharp, that's wrong, yeah? That's too wide. That's exactly right. So you have to kind of feel that on a physical level, what kind of intervals you have when you play. That helps tremendously to remember it with your ears. The next tip is to move from section to section in a very well organized way, because most learners just play their pieces through many times and it's not very effective. So in order to really learn it, you have to stay with this section for a little bit. For example, you look at the analysis and you find out that bars 7 to 10 is my episode 1. So let's work on this episode 1, and we would stay with these 3.5 bars for, let's say, 15 minutes. And as soon as we figure out how it works and as soon as we understand it, then we move to the next section. It means, of course, that within 1 hour practicing session, for example, we can't cover the whole fugue. But it's actually better to cover a few sections profoundly than to just play it through many times. And when you learn something like this, keep in mind that there are 2 dimensions we have to be aware of. A horizontal dimension, where we have some melodies going through, and a vertical dimension, which represents an underlying harmonic skeleton. So when working on a horizontal level in this particular spot, for example, what I have to figure out is whether there is some logic. What is common for this spot? And what is really common for this spot is this motive, because it repeats many times in different voices, here, and then here, and here, and here, and it actually repeats very often following a stretto logic. And stretto is when you start a subject and you start another one before finishing the previous one. So this is like most of you who start a new piece before finishing the previous piece. For example, between bars 5 and 6 we have a stretto, because while playing this, the end of this subject, we already start the next one. You see? And then we start to make kind of small stretto from these. So we have a lot of these 4 notes motives imitating each other in different voices. That's why step number 1 would be to extract them and to play them separately. All of them, not skipping anyone. As soon as you understand this, as soon as you know this, you can add other voices. These elements will structure your horizontal flow. And when working on vertical dimension, we have to recognize harmonies. For this, whenever we find a spot which sounds like a chord, we have to stop, listen to it, and try to understand what kind of chord is this. Oh, this looks like D major chord. And then we end up with this chord. So what's that? This is a little bit confusing because this F sharp is a suspended note. It's like a leftover from the previous bar. So we have to look where it resolves. It resolves here. So we end up with the E major chord. And then this sounds like E major 7 chord, which resolves typically to A major. And this is exactly what happens here. Still A major. And here we get A7. And we know that A7 resolves typically to D major. So let's see where this chord goes. Still A7. And it does resolve to D major indeed. In other words, I have to be able to simplify this chord and to just play a harmonic progression which is hidden behind all these curvy voices. So I should be able to play it like this. Because this is an underlying structure. As soon as I understand this vertical foundation and as soon as I worked through different voices in a horizontal dimension, of course it will be much easier to actually play it the way it's written. And this is also a fresh harmony. Sounds new, sounds interesting. So let's look what that. And this is our E minor chord. So I ask myself, what is E minor in D major? In D major, E minor is just a second scale degree. And what we know about a second scale degree is that it's very often followed by fifth scale degree. And this is a very typical chord progression, and it's so typical, so important that jazz musicians are just obsessed with 2, 5, 1 progressions, right? So we are supposed to get an expectation. So this is what would have to happen. It's like what your relatives who don't believe in you expect that you will end up in a... But what happens instead is that you suddenly open a startup and buy a Ferrari. Yeah, so this is unexpected. So we ask ourselves what happens here. E7 modulation to A major. So noticing such things, what would have to be and what actually happened helps a lot also to memorize it really well. And of course, one of the most powerful and effective ways to learn music is to transpose it to another key, because this requires us to work much more and to activate our ears a lot. So after playing it in the original key and figuring out everything in the original key, as soon as you feel yourself more or less confident, you just shift it to, let's say, E major. And then to F major. And then to... and so on. So I honestly have to say I'm lazy to transpose in all 12 keys, but I try to transpose to at least 3-4 different keys when I learn a section before moving to the next section. The next tip is very important. Since you are going to cover deeply only a portion of a piece within a day, let's say today you have learned 15 bars, but really kind of profoundly. So tomorrow, before revisiting those 15 bars, you have to start from the new section directly, from bar 16 to, let's say, 25, and to cover those first, while your head is most active, most fresh. And only after that, you revisit what you have learned yesterday. In this way, you will each day progress a little bit further instead of getting stuck on the older bars and not having mental capacity to push your studying further. And the last thing that I can suggest to you is when preparing, for example, to a performance with a fugue, learn to start it, to be able to start it from every spot, from any spot. And this is what I was doing as a kid. Of course, I was so horrified by the perspective of forgetting where I am and just losing myself on stage. So I would train myself by starting from the second beat of every bar, or from the fourth beat, or from the upbeat note, from any spot. So I would play a fugue, I would play like 8 bars, and then I would stop, and then I would start from the middle of the second bar and play the same. And then from the fourth beat of the first bar, and just check myself that I could enter the stream on any given spot. Thank you for watching this. Please like and subscribe this video since you made it so far. That's amazing, because this is a very dense content and I don't expect many of you to make it that far. But congratulations if you did it, and have fun playing piano. See you next time.